Good evening, everyone, and thank you once again for tuning in to our latest all-new edition of the Milford Informer. I am Milford TV Executive Director Tim Coet. We hope everyone is enjoying this extended Thanksgiving holiday weekend, and we come to you on this holiday weekend with a special extended edition of the Milford Informer. We are excited to present here tonight a special partnership along with the Citizens for Milford to present to you a special voter education series of interviews that is geared toward increasing community participation in Milford's local election. Of course, the local elections are held every year in the month of April to elect important positions that have direct consequences to your day-to-day life here in the Milford community. And so the Citizens for Milford hoping to increase not only turnout in voting for the local elections, but also participation in running for all of the local offices here in Milford. And so with that in mind, we present some detailed information about the process of becoming a candidate, and also some information to learn a little bit more about each of the offices that you find each and every year on the local election ballot. So without further ado, let's dig into these interviews, starting with an introduction from the Citizens for Milford. This week on the Milford Informer, we are so pleased to be joined by Jerry Eddins, part of the Citizens for Milford here in town, to begin a discussion for what we hope will really be an educational opportunity for the residents of Milford as it pertains to local elections here in town. But first and foremost, Jerry, so happy to have you once again on the Milford Informer. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's always a pleasure to be here at Milford TV.
So when we talk about the local Milford elections, Citizens for Milford has really had a great commitment to trying to get as much out there to the public to educate voters on the races going on in the lead up to the April elections.
Yes.
I think it's been over a decade now that we've been partnering with CFM on candidate forum series every March to be able to get the candidates for the contested races out there to really help deliver their message and help to inform the residents for who is running for these important local races. Can you maybe talk about that commitment that CFM has
Absolutely.
had?
Yes, absolutely. So the mission of Citizens for Milford has two key components. The first one is to encourage active citizen participation in the community. And the second one is to organize projects and events that help contribute to the vitality and improve quality of life here in Milford. So, for example, the Beautification Day in April, the Field of Flags and Draper Memorial Park. But going back to that first component of our mission, active citizen participation, this goes back to when we were first organized back in early 2014. Our very first event was to host a candidate forum featuring the candidates running in contested races in Milford's town election. And so that was March 2014. We've been doing it ever since, hosting an election, even throughout the pandemic, hosting these candidate forums, helping Milford voters get to know who's running for office and where each of them stands on the issues. In conjunction with that, we also provide a lot of voter information, voter education, geared at helping Milford voters understand how to register to vote, where to do that, what the election timelines are. We've been working actively with the town clerk's office throughout, this last decade, as you said. And so this year, as we do every year after a particular project or event, after this year's election, we sat down and, talked about, okay, what are we doing for voter education? And then a member said, what are we doing for candidate education? And what can we do to help get more Milford residents involved in the process of throwing their hats in the ring to run for a seat on the select board, on the Parks Commission, on the school committee? And so with that idea, we reached out in partnership to you, Milford TV, as well as the town clerk's office to come up with this series of interviews to inform Milford residents what it takes to actually run for office here in Milford. And not only that, to explain what each of the positions that will be on the ballot in April 2025, what the roles and responsibilities of each of those positions are.
It's a really great initiative, and kind of digging a little bit deeper, Jerry, into I think it is important to have sort of a two-pronged approach to the local election, getting more candidates involved and getting more residents involved in the voting process. And this is something that I know we reflect a lot, you and I, after elections. And going back through the numbers from some of the recent local elections, we had a 16% voter turnout in 2024 for the April election, which is a low number until you look at what happened the 2 years prior, where we didn't even reach 10% of registered voters coming out for the April elections. We haven't seen voter turnout even in the 30% range since, strangely enough, the 2020 election, which was in the midst of the pandemic, so kind of an outlier year there. That also lined up with the last time that we had a contested select board race.
Right.
And so I feel like it all kind of comes back together in getting more candidates involved, having more vibrant races, also seems to then bring out more people to get involved in voting for the election. So really important to really target this both to the general voting public and also a call to action to get more candidates involved.
Right, absolutely. And so when you have more contested races on the ballot, more voters are engaged. And not only does that offer the Milford public a choice, but it also contributes to the overall conversation about what is happening here in the community. I'm a town meeting member, and we just had special October town meeting within the last 2 weeks. And it's really interesting what you learn just as a town meeting member based on the articles that are on the warrant. And so participating in town meeting, and of course, that's an opportunity to get involved and to get on the ballot. We will have the town moderator, Michelangelo Bontempo, coming to the studio to talk about what it means to be a town meeting member as a part of this series. But having more folks step up to the plate to run for town office, whether it's town meeting, select board, school committee, it really contributes to the overall conversation and enabling all Milford residents to understand what's happening here in Milford.
And so just a great approach to this series. We'll have representatives from the town clerk's office in to really go through the local election ballot from sort of that outside perspective, really giving a lot of great information on the races, terms, general information about a lot of these positions. But it's really going to be great, too, to have actual elected officials who will come in to talk about each of their positions, whether it's Mike Bontempo talking about town meeting members. We'll have members of the select board in to talk about select board seats, the board of library trustees, all of the various elected positions in town to really give some insight about what it takes to serve in each of those positions. Because, Jerry, I'm sure for a lot of folks out in the community, it may seem a little daunting to sit at home to think about, well, I have something to say, I have a lot of thoughts about the community, but I'm just not sure if I can make that commitment to run for office, or maybe it's just that fear of the unknown. So to perhaps make these positions a little bit more accessible to people, to learn about what it takes to hold these positions, that's certainly the hope that it will inspire more people to get involved.
Yes, absolutely. That's the goal. So 2 goals. One is to get more people involved in running for office, and then to encourage a greater voter turnout in April.
And the reality is we see a lot of participation in the statewide races, in certainly presidential elections. And those are things, Jerry, that obviously command a lot of attention in the media. But it's a cliche to say, but it all comes down to the local level. And
yes.
there are so many things that are decided that have a direct impact on people's lives at the local level. And so it may not feel important compared to a lot of the things that we see in the news media day in and day out about a presidential election, but really what happens in your school committee, in your select board, in your planning board, zoning board, all of these other positions, those are really important things that have a tangible impact on a resident's day-to-day life.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Local elections are where it's at. Really, all of these different positions that will be on the ballot, like you said, school committee, select board, parks commission. There's a lot happening in Milford's parks right now, and the parks commissioners are the ones who are the ultimate authority in determining what, that they have jurisdiction over the parks. Sewer commission. They're actually, interestingly, Milford has 5 constables. They're all elected, and they are all up for re-election in April. But what does a constable do? I imagine most folks in Milford are like me. I don't really know what they do. And so having these elected officials come into the studio and talk about their jobs, what their terms are, how much time they have to spend in their roles, we're really hoping that will help inform the public and get some people interested in learning what they can do to run for town office.
Well, these are really great conversations to have, so we are looking forward to having a series of elected officials in here to have these conversations, and then we'll be sharing them with you here on the Milford Informer in the weeks to come. So again, we will take a comprehensive look at all of the positions that you will be voting for in the April 2025 ballot, and of course there will certainly be opportunity for folks to throw their hat in the ring and get involved with these positions as well. So I encourage you to keep a close eye on this series, and if you have something to say, if you want to get involved in the local political process, this is an opportunity for you to learn about these positions and maybe decide that you want to be a candidate on that 2025 ballot. And so once again, Jerry, we're so thrilled to partner with the Citizens for Milford on this, and we really hope it makes a difference in the community.
Yes, thank you so much, Tim. We're looking forward to continuing the partnership.
We have 2 outstanding folks here from the town of Milford to be able to explain some big picture things about Milford's local election process. We have Amy and Danielle from the town clerk's office. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So maybe a good thing to start with is maybe just a quick snapshot of the town clerk's office itself. I know that you both have a big job here in town, that you both do such an outstanding job tackling some really busy times of year. Could you just kind of give us a snapshot of what the day-to-day is like at the town clerk's office?
Sure. Well, as you know, we just finished the presidential election season, so we are all very glad that is over. Most of our other day-to-day operations are our vital records for the town: births, deaths, marriages, dog licensing, registering businesses for DBAs, meeting notices for the town, town meeting, those types of things.
Great. So we've had an opportunity. We'll be sharing a number of these installments with the folks in the community about specific offices in Milford and their key duties and responsibilities. But when it comes to the local election, it kind of all starts with the town clerk's office. So I'd love for you ladies, if you could, to kind of give us maybe what a resident needs to know if they happen to be out there and interested in running for office for the first time. What are some of the key things to know going into that process?
Key things to know is every January, so the first Monday in January, which for next year will be January 6th, our nomination papers become available for our annual town election, which for next year will be April 1st. So those will be available for any of the offices that are coming up for either re-election, or if there's any openings, or for town meeting. And you simply have to be a registered voter in the town of Milford to run for elected office, which means you'd have to be 18 years of age or older, a United States citizen, and a registered voter.
Excellent.
Yeah. And when they come in to pull the papers, either for an open position, we go over the guidelines of what they need to do, how many signatures are requested, and a few more just in case we can't read the signature. Normal positions, other opening seats are 50 signatures, town meeting 30. And then with the town meeting interested parties, we give them lists of their precincts, streets, and addresses so they know who they can contact for possible signatures for their papers within their precinct if they're interested in the town meeting. So we give them as much information as they're going off to obtain signatures, if that's what they want.
I'm sure that's very helpful to be able to have that kind of information. And then we hear a lot about the pulling of nomination papers during that first part of the campaign season. So obviously that's the first step to come and talk to you folks, to be able to pull those papers, get the signatures, and then there's sort of a timetable involved with the nomination papers. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes. We give, generally the state doesn't allow as much time as we allow. Usually there's only a 2-week window to be able to pull and return papers. We give ample amounts of time for people to be able to do so. So if someone decided to pull papers, we wouldn't need them back until February. So we give them a lot of time to be able to run around and get their signatures.
Great. And then in terms of campaigning, when should a candidate typically start campaigning? Do you have any sort of insight or advice about sort of the campaign aspect of running for a local office?
In my opinion, they really should wait until they actually physically pull their papers to start their campaign, or letting people know that they'd like to run for office or against a candidate. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes it happens closer to the end of maybe this year. People start thinking about January and thinking that they might want to run against somebody. But typically we try to wait till we physically have that, written acknowledgement that they do want to run for office before they take the leap and start running with it.
And a good note for all of our viewers out there, you may see a graphic pop up on your screen from time to time, just giving you an overview of the positions as you will see them on the 2025 ballot for the Milford local election. Continuing to drill down a little bit on campaigning, are there rules about how to form a campaign committee? Could you maybe delve into that aspect of it a little bit more?
What we do is we generally give any of the candidates the information to be able to contact the Office of Campaign and Political Finance themselves. They are the best resources in order to get the most appropriate and up-to-date guidance for campaigning. Our biggest thing is we want to make sure that candidates are not having, if they have a committee, they aren't having other municipal employees as their treasurer. That's the biggest thing, because they're not able to collect money for them. So, but they would be able to get all that guidance from OCPF, and they're wonderful to work with.
In which we give them also information on not all their contacts of who they need to, the information on how to file, what forms they need to file, and when they need to turn those into the clerk's office if they do, have a committee and things like that. So we're giving all the candidates as much information as possible to accurately campaign. We do have them reach out to, campaign finance to guide them with the most up-to-date accurate, because things, easier for them to tell them is accurate rather than from us.
This is so enormously helpful to know. I'm sure that there are probably a lot of folks out there in the community who have an interest in running for an office, or have something that they're passionate about that they want to get more involved. But I'm guessing for a lot of folks, the idea of campaigning seems so foreign, and it may keep a lot of folks away from the process, just feeling like they wouldn't know how to navigate it. But to know that there are such great resources provided directly from the town clerk's office, or if not from you, certainly there are other state resources that exist that you make available to these individuals. It seems like the process is much more attainable than maybe it would appear from the outside.
Yep.
We try to make it as easy and accessible as possible. We want to make their decisions to make such a decision as easy as possible for them, and as painlessly as possible for them.
And so I guess we could kind of wrap up, and this is a question that I'll continue to pose to all of the individuals that we speak with. In your own personal opinions, why is it so important for folks to get involved at the local level in politics within their own community?
Well, in my opinion, as we again just have made it through a presidential election, people focus so much on how, on the federal level, it's going to affect you, but they sometimes forget on the town level, what happens within your own town affects you even more. You know, these are the people making decisions on your tax rate, on your livelihood, on your homes and your trash and your sewer and your water and those types of things that affect us day to day. And, you know, not necessarily for the future, but every day.
Every day. And a lot of people, focus on those state elections. With this year, we had 2 primaries, a town and the state. It's very important, especially at the local level. The turnout average is about 11-12%, and we have 17% for the state level, which then allows, out of 19,000 registered voters in town and 30 some odd thousand residents total, essentially 2,000 voters making those decisions. So it's very important to get out on the local aspect, to vote and or be interested in running yourself.
It's so important to hear those numbers, and as we've covered elections here over the last several years in Milford, we've seen that that percentage of registered voters actually casting their ballot in the local election continue to drop down. So if you're out there in the community, so important to get involved in this process, whether you may be interested in running for a position yourself, but certainly getting more involved in the voting process as well, as again, so many critical decisions are made right here at the local level. Well, this has been such outstanding information to provide to the town, and again, we really appreciate all of the hard work that you both do for the community on a day in, day out basis. Amy, Danielle, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
We're taking you through all of the key positions that you will see on the 2025 Milford Town Election ballot, and an opportunity for us to learn more about the insight into these various positions, and what better way to do that than to talk to the individuals who hold these positions. And we're so pleased to have one of Milford's current Select Board members, the current chair of the Milford Select Board, Mike Walsh, with us today to tell us a little bit more about the position of Select Board member here in town. Mike, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
So, Mike, this is obviously a position that you have held here in the community for a long time now.
Yes.
If you could kind of give us a snapshot of the role of a Select Board member, maybe give us some of the basics of the key responsibilities.
Well, the Select Board, of course, is the governing body of the community. What makes Milford kind of unique is that you also have some boards in the community as well that have independently elected officials. So you have the Parks Department, the Sewer Department, the Water Department, which the people they have their own boards. So although the Board of Selectmen does oversee most boards within the community, there are still a couple of boards that are independently run by people that are elected by the citizens of the community. So that's why sometimes people may call one of the members of the Select Board with a concern about something that's going on in the Parks Department. We refer them to one of the Parks Commissioners. And it's not that we're not taking responsibility, but again, the park commissioners are independently elected and you need to go to them. So, but overall, the Select Board is the governing body of the community.
In terms of being on the Select Board, Mike, you've served several terms now on the board. What do you think is some important experience to have as an individual who may be interested in one day being on the Select Board?
I think it's important that, from my perspective, that you have served, that you have run for an elected office within the community. And I answer that question this way in that, and I know you're going to ask me about this later on, but it's important that you've had to run for an election. You've had to run an election. You've had to have gotten on the sidewalk. You've had to have knocked on doors. But you also learn to work the political system. And in other words, my 9 years on the school committee, the superintendent oversees the school district, and the role of a school committee member is budget and policy. You're not running the school district. The superintendent does that, and it's important that you learn your roles so that and a lot of times the school committee, I use that as an example, is what is used to leapfrog into the Board of Selectmen. But I would say to anybody, get involved in something within the community where you can learn to negotiate, or navigate is a better word, with the finance committee boards that you're going to have to go in front of. If you have a program that you're looking to, or you're looking to put an article on the warrant at town meeting, you learn to work with these different boards to get, the information, or get what you need done. And so it's an educational process, because now when you step up to the Board of Selectmen, you're overseeing that. And it's good to have that behind you.
Yeah, important insight there. In terms of the select board, Mike, what's sort of and I know this may be a hard question to answer, but what would you say is the time commitment involved in being a select board member? I'm imagining that might vary based on maybe the time of year, or maybe the type of candidate that's serving on the board.
It does. So typically, your fall, using October, the end of September, end of October, end of April to the end of May, and that is because we've got the October town meeting, the special town meeting. May, of course, we have the regular town meeting. So you have town meeting, you have getting ready for town meeting, but also typically, as chairman, your role as chairman, there are a lot of citations that you have to give away, whether it's a 100th birthday for somebody, Eagle Scouts, different programs in the community. Typically, those are always done October-ish, May-ish. So, fall and spring are your hot times of year. Of course, summertime, everything quiets down. The holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, again, traditionally settles down, So the hours to speak of, it depends on what you're involved in. The meetings, typically, we meet, twice a month. And the meetings on average are a couple hours. Once in a while you'll get a straggler.
As you have continued to serve on the Milford Select Board, what would you say are maybe some of the particularly challenging aspects of the position, maybe things that you either anticipated going in, or maybe things that you've learned along the way?
Well, I would say one of the challenges, and I dealt with it again, and I keep referring back to the school committee because we had contract negotiations. And so on the Board of Selectmen, you're dealing with multiple contract negotiations, and they're not a lack of a better word, a hostile situation, but it's a give and take. And so you know that there's a contract up, and they will come to you, and you look at the first proposal and you say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then it goes back, and so that can take some time and some understanding and being able to give and take. Okay, well, if we give this, what are we going to do here? And so that can be a challenge, and you just got to be level-headed and a good listener.
I'll maybe take this out to a bigger picture question and maybe take in some of your experience on the school committee as well. For people watching these videos who have never been part of an election process as a candidate, I'm sure there's probably a lot of things about navigating a campaign that would really be a shock to someone running for the first time. What are some of the things that are involved in being a candidate, in running for office, that folks might not know?
Well, Tim, that's a great question, because I was thinking about that last night, and it really has changed. So when I first ran for school committee, there was still organizational meetings. So mine was at the Italian Veterans Club, and basically people came and you made your presentation, and then you had tables set up, people that wanted to hold signs, people that wanted to knock on doors, and people would sign up for that. That has gone by the wayside. As multiple interviews on WMRC radio, here at the TV station. And, sign holding, Saturday morning sign holdings were big. The most important thing to me, and if I was talking to somebody that was going to run, get on the sidewalk. and knock on doors, because people, I had experiences. I still tell this story. I walked up a driveway one day. A gentleman was out on the driveway, and he said, hold on. He ran to his house, came out with a piece of paper with 3 questions on it. So people know you're coming, or people are looking for you to come. The vast majority of people still want to see how hard you want to work for that seat, because when you get in that seat, how hard are you going to work for them? It's about the constituents that put you in that seat. That's who you're representing, and you have to keep that in the forefront of your mind at all times.
Yeah, really important. I'll close with this final question, Mike. Obviously, again, for people looking from the outside who have full-time jobs and a lot of responsibilities at home, the thought of holding a political office in town may be folks feeling like that's too much. You're someone who has navigated this on top of a lot of other life responsibilities for a long time. What keeps you going? What keeps you continuing to come out to run for office? What are those rewarding aspects of holding a local political office?
Well, I can answer that question very easily. One of the biggest things we hear today, Tim, and this is, you'll hear people say, well, Milford isn't the same. Milford isn't what it used to be. But nothing's the same. Things change. And to be part of that change is important. And I love this community. And has it changed in the 16, 17 years that I've been an elected official? Absolutely it's changed. But, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And the rewards are great. And there are some rough times, but there are more rewarding times than there are rough times, because you can look and say, wow, together we did this. You didn't do it on your own, but it was the ability to sit with different people with different ideas on different boards and say, okay, what is our ultimate goal? What are we looking to do here? It's that old saying, it's okay to agree to disagree, but what's your ultimate goal? So, it's challenging, but, I would say to anybody that's thinking of it, do it. And if you're worried about time, your time commitment, you'll find the time. Everybody's life is busy, but if you're committed to it, and you have a passion for it, you'll find the time. You'll carve the time out of your day. Absolutely.
We're so happy to be joined by Megan Hornberger, member of the Milford School Committee. Megan, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Tim. I really appreciate it.
So, Megan, I think it's been a couple of terms for you on the school committee now. Is that right?
Yep, just kicking off my 3rd term, so about 6+ years into it.
So certainly a lot of great insight now with all of the years that you've dedicated to the school committee. If we can start with maybe just like an overall synopsis in your own words, Megan, of sort of the basic day-to-day responsibilities of a school committee member.
Yeah, I think it simply can be whittled down to 3, which are policy, budget, and oversight of the superintendent. And so at a very high level, kind of those are our responsibilities. Now, when you take a step back and think about those actually are quite massive. So we set the operational and strategic policies for the district, so setting the strategic plan and then funding it. Approving all policies, any new policies that we need to consider. So those all come through the school committee. On the budgetary front, we have a massive budget. The school district is quite large. We have a number of employees, and we serve 4,500-ish students. So we're a really important role there. So we set the policy, which then we take to town meeting for approval, also including any capital items. Super exciting that we're moving a potential new building project forward. And then oversight of the superintendent. So setting their goals on an annual basis, reviewing their performance, and then should we need to make a hiring or new decision in that direction as a discipline and oversight of the superintendent.
So, Megan, for folks who tune into the school committee meetings or attend them in person, usually at least every other week, that's the typical meeting schedule for a school committee member. But I know that there are other subcommittees involved and things like that. What would you say in terms of time commitment? Can you talk about that aspect of a school committee member?
Sure. It definitely varies, so let's be very upfront about that. I'd say plan on, say, at a minimum 4 to 6 hours a month. So to your point, we typically meet every other week. Normal-ish meetings are about an hour and a half. A lot of times we'll have an executive session at the end, so it goes a little longer. And then there's involvement on subcommittees. So, for example, policy, budget, facilities, marketing. I serve on the labor and management subcommittee, so there'll typically be 1 or 2 policy subcommittees a month as well. Often for those school committee meetings, you're getting a, 20 to 100-page packet in advance, so obviously you'd want to dedicate some time to kind of reviewing the materials and figuring out what questions you might have. So then there's a lot of just communication and coordination in terms of staying up to date in terms of what's going on in the district. I have the benefit of being a parent of 3, so, get to spend a lot of time navigating the buildings and, participating in events otherwise. So I don't deem those school committee responsibilities, but just participating in activities of the district. We obviously get invited to graduation every year, which is a great honor. So there's a lot of opportunities to engage. You'll also be asked to do a number of things if we're hiring for key positions, for example, to sit on an interview panel. Last year, our district went through an equity audit, so I had an opportunity to be on that team. So you get invited to also participate in a lot of different things. And again, I think it's at the individual's discretion and interest level in terms of which you'd like to participate in.
I'm sure folks in the community who have that inspiration to want to get more involved and potentially run for an office in town, I'm sure probably experience is something that maybe holds folks back. Oh, am I qualified to be on this board? From your own perspective, what do you feel is a good sort of experience to have to run for a seat on the school committee?
Yeah, for sure. I can speak personally, Tim, specifically in terms of what helped me. I had served on PTOs in a couple buildings and then also on the school council in a few buildings. And so I think being in tune with what some of the issues and challenges are within the district really create a great foundation for you to participate. Certainly, watch or join the meetings so you can see kind of what type of items we're discussing or what's coming up. That will be quite helpful. And then certainly ask questions, right? The administration will be, super helpful to candidates that are potentially interested reaching out. Certainly any current school committee member will be happy to speak with folks. So definitely just ask questions.
And just from a time commitment perspective too, you've obviously talked about a lot of the typical requirements and things for a school committee member. But again, another one of those things that I'm sure folks think about at home is how do I balance the time? And this is another great thing to hear from your perspective. You've obviously talked about you have family commitments at home. You have a lot of other things going on in your life besides school committee. For you personally, how do you balance that?
I will be honest, when I was part of the school committee, when we navigated the pandemic, I worked part-time, and that was a good thing because I joined the reopening committee, and that was almost a full-time job. So I think it depends. I think you create the time that works for you. So obviously they send out meeting materials a few days in advance, so you could review those early in the morning, at lunchtime, at the end of the day, sort of dependent on your schedule. Certainly you plan on Thursday nights generally not being available, so you set those aside a time to be at committee meetings. But I think it's like anything else in life. Exercise, whatever spiritually you may be into, you carve out the time for things that are important to you. And I truly believe that this commitment is very important, and I make the time for it.
Yeah, talk about some of the positives. What are some of the real rewarding aspects that you've experienced being on the school committee?
Sure, 100%. So specific things that come to mind. So my youngest is a 3rd grader. We rolled out STEM at the K-2 level a few years ago, and hearing him come home and speak to the activities that he was doing in that class, it was just so inspirational when you're actually seeing like the budgetary allocations have a direct impact on your kid's life, and he was loving it. And so that's incredibly rewarding. I also think, you go to different district events. We have an incredibly strong music and arts program. And so going and seeing hundreds of kids participate, be it in choral or in instruments, you just kind of get blown away. So you see the money and the dollars that you're allocating impact students' life. I think that's just truly incredible.
No, that really is tremendous. Well, Megan, as we close out here, and not to put you on the spot, but just sort of the overall big picture question, and really the objective behind these interviews is to get more involvement in the community,
Sure.
Whether that's folks who are interested in potentially running for office or also understanding the importance of voting for these positions and getting involved in the local election process. What would be your sort of pitch to the community, your words of advice to the community for just getting involved and staying active locally?
Absolutely. You can and will make a difference. I think I'm always amazed when you go to, cast your ballot and you see someone who's running unopposed. You think no one else was interested in this position, right? We're doing such important things and we're impacting so many lives. So if you're interested, please consider it. I also highly encourage anyone considering school committee or any other role, consider becoming a town meeting member, because at the end of the day, they're approving everything that we're bringing forward. And so that role is also incredibly important. And that's a great way to get involved with a minimal commitment, right? They meet twice a year. So also encourage folks to reach out for town meeting.
Joining us on the show today is Milford's town moderator, Mike Bontempo, to talk to us a little bit about town meeting. Mike, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Town meeting, obviously such an important body within the community, Mike, when we start talking about the local election and ways to get involved in the town. I'd love to maybe open up with just a very broad question for you. For any of the residents out there who are unfamiliar with the town meeting process, can you just give us a description of what town meeting itself is?
Okay, well, town meeting is the legislative body for any town in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And there are it takes two forms, either an open town meeting or a representative town meeting. And that's all dependent upon the number of inhabitants in the town. So any town in Massachusetts that has less than 6,000 inhabitants, it has to be an open town meeting. And if there's more than 6,000 inhabitants, the town has an option of either having an open town meeting or a representative town meeting. And what is meant by that is an open town meeting is any registered voter of the town is a member and can go to the town meeting and can discuss the issues that are in the warrant as well as make votes. And then in a representative town meeting, that is what we have in Milford, and that is an elected body. And so that means you have to take out, maybe we'll explain a little bit later on, but you have to be elected to that position, and there are also in representative town meeting in Milford, there's also at-large members who are there by virtue of their office. So that is the what town meeting is, and town meeting decides various questions that come before it, having to deal with things like appropriations for the annual budget, as well as for any capital budgets that might come before it. It also votes on general bylaws for the town, zoning bylaws for the town. It also petitions the state for special legislation for local matters of the town, and it also has the option of adopting statutes that the Commonwealth puts forth. So, again, town meeting is a legislative body, and they make the decisions on a lot of things that happen in Milford.
And obviously, as you've described, town meeting is comprised of a body of town meeting members that represent the various precincts in the town, as well as the at-large body as well. Can you talk about the sort of specific duties and responsibilities of a town meeting member?
Well, I mean, that is what I just described just previously. Is those responsibilities? Their responsibilities. They have the right. Okay, first with their rights. They have the right to debate each article in the warrant. They have the right to amend it if they so choose. They also have the right to vote on it too. Their responsibilities are what I just described before, which is to make appropriations for the annual budget, as well as for the any capital budgets. They have the responsibility to make decisions on the general bylaws of the town, the zoning bylaws, any special legislation that has to go to the general court, as well as adopting any statutes that the state enacts that have to be adopted by the town. So those are the rights and responsibilities of the town meeting members.
And Milford has a typical pattern of holding annual town meeting in the spring, a special town meeting in the fall. Outside of those town meetings themselves, Mike, are there responsibilities for town meeting members outside of the meetings themselves?
No, there isn't. I mean, well, there are. I mean, yeah, the town bylaw has to have one annual town meeting per year. Okay, and the special town meetings can be any number, and that's all decided by the select board. And the select board calls for the annual town meeting. They also call for any special town meetings. And as you mentioned, Milford typically has two town meetings. The first one in the annual, which takes care of the annual budget, and then in the fall, They typically do a town meeting that just deals with capital expenditures, and that's dependent upon, they do that because then they find out what kind of aid they're going to be getting from the state. But above and beyond that, outside of town meeting, the town meeting members have no responsibilities unless they're, again, civically involved in other committees and whatnot. For example, people probably don't realize that, but town meeting has 3 standing committees, and they are the Finance Committee, the Planning Board, and the Personnel Board. And they do a lot of the work during the course of the year that eventually town meeting members vote on at the various town meetings. So there may be town meeting members who might be involved in the Finance Committee, may be a Planning Board member, and also may be a personnel member of the Personnel Board. So they may be doing other things outside of the actual town meetings.
Oh, very, very helpful information to know. And Mike, one of the things as we're trying to educate the residents through this series about various positions in town, I've heard from a lot of other folks that if you're looking to get involved in the local political process here in Milford, becoming a town meeting member is a great place to start. Is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, I would agree. It's probably one of the easiest things to do. Having getting you have to take out the only somewhat difficult part is taking out the nomination papers and getting the 30 signatures, because it's kind of a lot of signatures. Most towns in the Commonwealth that are represented at town meeting either require 10 or 15 signatures, and the timing of it is not so great, because it is typically during the winter time that you're out there having to go around the neighborhood and getting the 30 signatures. But it is pretty easy to do. The meetings run roughly about 3 hours. You meet twice a year. It's not like you have to get up every time and speak. What's really important is you're there, you listen to the arguments, and you make a vote. That's the most important thing.
We have another individual with plenty of insight to bring to the table, wearing a lot of hats around town, but today talking to us all about the planning board here in Milford. We have Chris Wilson joining us. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate being here.
So I want to open up, as we always do, with just sort of a big picture question, kind of getting a snapshot of the duties and responsibilities on the planning board. If you could kind of go through in your own words the responsibilities of a planning board member.
Yeah, sure. So planning board member is one of 5 members. You serve for a 5-year term. And mainly we do a lot of site plan review and approval is the main thing. We also have the comprehensive plan that we're working on right now. So that obviously will look at the different facets amongst Milford, where you're looking at traffic, you're looking at housing, you're looking at the different industries that are in town, and how do we continue to promote Milford. So that's going to the comprehensive plan will be a significant kind of work in progress as we're moving on. But again, the site plans, and then also looking at the bylaws, right, and how that pertains to building and construction in and around town, and understanding those bylaws and having them change and evolve with time.
I know, as I mentioned, Chris, you've been heavily involved in town. You've served multiple terms on the school committee, a part of the planning board now as well. For this particular role, what was it that stood out to you to make you want to get involved with planning board?
So when I'm not serving on on planning board or on school committee, I'm a mechanical engineer. So my mechanical engineer background, just have a general interest in kind of what is going on in and around town from that level. So wanted to serve the town just to see as the town's evolving, and kind of how do I put my knowledge from the engineering side of it and put it to practice for the planning board. So again, it was just an inherent interest that I had in the overall scheme of it.
For a planning board member, what are what is the time commitment factor on a week to week or month to month basis? So
we meet twice a month. Usually the meetings anywhere is right around an hour long. It just depends on the level of the agenda and how many items are on there. So obviously the 1 hour twice a month commitment. And then what I typically do is I'm looking at the agenda a few days in advance, if there is a particular property that we're going to, look at from a site plan, I typically drive by that property. So however long I want to take for that time to really go look at that property, get a, kind of a real life look at what, the property owner is intending to do, and just try to understand it. And then also if there's anything that would impact the bylaws, right? And then going through and checking through the bylaws. So, you can do a couple hours worth of prep work before a meeting, and then the meeting itself.
You mentioned you have that mechanical engineering background that really helps for a position like this. Is it truly helpful to succeed as a planning board member to have some sort of an expertise in an engineering field?
I think from a technology side of it and technical standpoint, it's helpful, but it's certainly not necessary or required. The town bylaw is, in zoning bylaws, it's 100 pages. I don't know every one of those and have not committed them to memory. So if I don't know something, I can go to Larry Duncan, the town planner, or Liz Manini, the town engineer, or any one of my other planning board members, and just ask them questions. So I think that as long as you're not afraid to ask questions of answers that you just don't know, you can be very successful in being a planning board member.
What are some of the challenges that maybe the public doesn't know about that the planning board has to deal with?
I'd say the 100 pages of zoning bylaws that you have to
For sure.
to kind of, again, understand and knowing how a site plan can or cannot be affected by those zoning bylaws. So certainly just trying to look at a site plan, reviewing the bylaws, and seeing how everything is going to work together. So those are, it's certainly a challenge, when you're just looking at something two-dimensionally on a piece of paper, but we live in a three-dimensional world.
What about some of the positives? What are some of the rewarding aspects you feel about being part of the planning board?
I think, seeing the comprehensive plan kind of develop and take shape and really have an understanding of what the people of Milford are looking for, what are the aspects that they like, and what are the aspects they're looking to improve. So I feel like that's going to be a great type of document that is coming together and that we can present to the town, and really is going to steer the town in multiple directions, right? Whether it's from the residential side, the commercial side, or the industrial side. And this, just in general, just seeing what sort of, what are people in this town looking to develop for resources, whether it is in housing or commercial or industrial side, that the residents of this town, what do they want, and what is going to be in the best benefit for our town.
Kind of zooming back out to another big picture question. So you've run for multiple elected offices here in Milford. What were maybe some of the things, when you ran for your first position here in town, what were some of the things that really were eye-opening to you about the process of first getting involved in local government?
Fortunately, I had a lot of help. I reached out to the right people that helped me. But the aspects of campaigning and what campaigning is all about. It's not just holding signs, it's not just putting signs on people's lawns, but it's really connecting with the voters of Milford. So it was, it's challenging as, print media has gone away. So what are the other aspects of how to connect with people? And certainly like something like a Milford TV provides that.
What keeps you coming back? What keeps you involved in local government year after year?
Yeah, I just enjoy serving the people of Milford, the voters of Milford. Growing up, my parents were not necessarily elected positions, but they helped out in PTOs and booster clubs. So I think that kind of steered me towards a direction of public service, and I just enjoy being a voice for the voters, and hopefully that voice helps steer things to what the majority wants in our town.
So as we wrap things up, I know that as we've partnered with the Citizens for Milford on this interview series, the goal is to really inspire people out there in the community who maybe haven't taken an active role in local government to try to get more involved, whether that's to run for office themselves or get more involved perhaps in the town meeting process, showing up on election day and casting their vote. What is your advice to people out there to get more involved in their local government?
Yeah, just you mentioned all those different boards like town meeting. Town meeting, it's typically twice a year. So if you're really looking to get your voice in, and any voter in Milford can get up and speak to an issue. So I think that if you want Milford to go in a certain direction and want to voice that, that direction to the rest of the town, I think that getting on a board is what you want to do. There are multiple boards out there. We've seen in recent past that we haven't had a lot of, contested races. And even as someone that will be an incumbent for any of these future races, I still welcome challengers, right? And I can't just say I want to run, unopposed. I think that it's important to run with someone against you, just so you can talk to those issues and you can get in front of the people of Milford in a forum and be able to hear their questions and be able to answer those questions. So yeah, just get out, help out your town, be a part of it. And don't just be, as they say, the keyboard warrior that's just sitting there and saying, well, I wish they did this and I wish they did that. It's a couple hours a month of time for the planning board, so why not be a part of it? Put yourself out there a little bit. I understand that, the election process, leading up to it and campaigning, sometimes it can sound a little difficult, but it's amazing how many people will come out to help you. And it's a lot of fun just holding signs with friends and with competitors, because you just sit there, you have a good time, you joke, you enjoy it. People of Milford are driving by, beeping horns and waving in support. So it can be an enjoyable process, even though it does sound a little bit daunting.
We're so pleased to be joined in this interview by Paul Mazzucchelli, who wears a great many hats here in the Milford community. Today we'll be honing in on Paul's role on the Board of Health, but first and foremost, Paul, always happy to have you on Milford TV.
And
welcome.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having the service too for the public, so they'll get a better understanding of what their municipal boards do for them.
Yeah, we're happy to do it. We're so pleased to be partnering with the Citizens for Milford on this entire series of informational videos. So, Paul, first and foremost, if you could sort of tell us in your own words the basic roles and responsibilities that are involved with being part of Milford's Board of Health.
There's a lot to it that people really don't see, because a lot of times a health department, especially a local one, is a victim of its own success. Like anything else, people don't really appreciate public health until sickness comes. So throughout the run of the day, people are going to work, they're going to restaurants, they're, breathing clean air and all that, but that's, something that's expected and should be. But in the local Board of Health, they're responsible for so many. When I'm asked to what does a Board of Health do? I say, well, just think of how many times it touches your life throughout the course of a day. You get up in the morning, the first thing you do is you go to the bathroom, you flush the toilet. That water now is contaminated, has to go somewhere to be clean so it doesn't cause any environmental health problems. You have a drink of water. That water that you have from the faucet doesn't come clean all the time, so public health makes it potable for you to drink. You have breakfast. That food that you're eating is inspected by public health from farm to table, especially locally, when it comes to your town. You get in your car, you turn on the ignition, and you ride away. That exhaust is now tested to make sure that it's at least safe enough for the environmental clean air. You feel healthy. That's because you had your vaccines through various clinics that the Board of Health had. So just with those examples, throughout the course of a day, how much does public health touch you? How much are you in contact with public health? And that's why a lot of people don't realize, well, what does the Board of Health do? You check restaurants, or do you condemn houses? And yes, we do. But we have a responsibility. And in Massachusetts, we're very unique, because each individual's municipality has its own Board of Health. You go as closest to Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Connecticut, that's the state Board of Health. Again, to repeat myself for effectiveness, each municipality in Massachusetts has their own local Board of Health. And that's fantastic, because that what your individual city or town would need, more than someone who's sitting in Boston behind a desk. And that's what makes it good. And like I said, we have a certain set of responsibilities that are called your minimum mandated responsibilities that the Department of Public Health puts out for us. That's who we answer to. You know, we're an autonomous board, like the school committee is with the Department of Education. A local board of health has that responsibility to the Department of Public Health. Again, everything that has to do with health, safety, and the protection of the environment is what your local board of health is responsible for.
It's fascinating when you start to break it down like that, really starting to understand how many different aspects of society that the Board of Health has a role in. So with that in mind, Paul, with all of those different things that the Board of Health is monitoring, is taking care of, what does a typical week or typical month for a member of the Milford Board of Health look like from a time commitment standpoint?
The actual member?
Yes.
Okay, well, I would like the member to be more or less in tune to what the office is doing. Don't forget, we have the opportunity to appoint an agent or a director, inspectors, clerks, to help carry out those mandated responsibilities. And to be in tune with the office is very important, to actually do their homework on what the next agenda would be, to help make the next agenda. And how they can get at that, too, is they talk to the office staff, talk to various department heads throughout the town. Most of all, more importantly, is the residents. What do they feel as though that could be improved health-wise, safety-wise, environmental-wise?
And then in terms of, for someone who may be interested in becoming a Board of Health member, what sort of experience is helpful? I would imagine that having perhaps some sort of medical experience may be helpful, but for someone who was newly interested in becoming part of the board,
Sure.
what's some valuable experience to bring to the table?
I would say their ability for leadership and for guidance, and to be under an obligation to find out what the current Board of Health is obligated in doing right now. Find out, go through the minutes of the meeting, interview the staff, find out how they can help, how they can be an effective member. And that's what I would recommend. Again, you don't have to be a doctor or a lawyer or a nurse. It would help. Believe me, it would help. But we also have our staff that does that as well. We have our VNA staff that does all our medical aspects of it, our disease investigations, our clinics, our screenings. You know, I always would say, find out what a committee or a department needs, and if you can fulfill that obligation to make them better.
Excellent. In terms of the biggest challenges that a Board of Health member might face, now I know we're just coming off of a period of time where you may have faced your single biggest challenge in dealing with COVID and everything that came from that, but in terms of your typical day-to-day role on the Board of Health, what are some of the big challenges that you typically face?
Public health changes practically every day, let alone every year. But like, for instance, you take in Milford, for instance, one of the challenges that we have as board members is to now move this illegal conversion problem along. Okay, that's a public health issue. I know it's also a building because they're illegally converting homes, but it's a public health issue because it causes potential health and safety problems for the occupants that are living there, for the neighborhood, and for the rest of our first responders as well. So, I mean, that would be a challenge that would come up. Another one would be, for instance, that we just had our flu clinics. We have to keep the respiratory diseases down, the flu down, along with now COVID starting to raise its ugly head again in certain variants. So we have to plan those clinics appropriately. And it's good to be proactive instead of reactive. When you're reacting to somebody, the problem's already there, and it's a little more difficult to address. But when you're proactive, hopefully you can prevent it before it happens, and if it does start to happen, you're more apt to correct it earlier.
Really, really fascinating insight that you've been able to bring us today, Paul. So as we close things out here, another just sort of big picture question to finish out on, and one particularly useful to ask you, knowing that you have served in so many different capacities in local government during your career. Can you speak to the importance of getting involved in the local election process and being active in local government, why that is so important?
Absolutely. It's very important because when you're in that particular position, be it a committee, an appointed committee, or an elected board, you're representing the public. You have an obligation to them to make sure that if they have that trust in you, you don't want to disappoint them. And that's what I recommend to somebody. If they're going to run for office, please do, if you feel as though that you can do it properly and you can make us all proud of you and you can be a credit to the community.
Today, we're so happy to welcome in from Milford's Parks Commission, Joe Arcudi is joining us this week. Joe, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Joe, I want to open up with just sort of like a big picture question. Can you kind of sum up in your own words what the role of the Parks Commission is here in the Milford community?
Sure. The way it was explained to me when I first started years ago was had to do with we are not day-to-day operations. We basically deal with setting policies, procedures, and procurement for the Parks Department. So any policies for the use of parks in town, procuring funding through town meeting and grants and what have you, based on any of the work-related events that are going to be happening, around like the pool or work at the town park.
How would you describe sort of a typical month for members of the Parks Commission? What from the time commitment, meetings, take us through that sort of typical schedule for a member of the Parks Commission.
Month to month, it varies. We do meet. We have monthly meetings, open to the public, open meeting law. Mr. Razum, who's our Parks Director, he posts it about a week before, put on our agenda. And it's basically, our commitment is based on what comes out of that meeting. And it just may be a monthly meeting, or there are times where in the springtime, early spring and early fall, we would be meeting with our finance subcommittee to get ready for the annual town meeting or the fall town meeting, based on if we have any articles in those town meetings. So it could be, once a month. It could be 2 or 3 times a month.
Now, you've obviously served on the Parks Commission for quite a while. For someone out there who may have an interest in the Parks Commission, what's sort of the experience going into it that could be helpful serving on the commission? Maybe even something that you maybe didn't know at the time as you were first getting on the board that maybe would be helpful experience to have to bring to the table.
I think what piqued my interest to get on the board was at the time before I was involved heavily with youth sports in town, whether it was Milford Youth football, baseball, what have you. So I saw a lot of what was going on in the town at the parks, some of the needs and wants from some of the youth boards. And, growing up, being a Milford person, growing up here, and I saw what Mr. Inglese was able to do, and Mr. Moran and Mr. Barchi, all those years, along with Mr. Brashani, that, I wanted to try to keep that going.
Obviously, for all of the roles in local government here in Milford, there are time commitments. There are things that can be challenging about those positions. I'm curious too, what are some of the rewarding aspects of being part of the Parks Commission that you've maybe enjoyed most in your tenure?
When you see a project come to fruition, every project you do, there are going to be people that are happy about it. There are going to be people that aren't happy about it. But when you have that finished product, and the people that were a little leery about that project they come up to you and, hey, listen, the pool, for example, right? There were a lot of people that, had concerns about spending the money on the pool. And, look at it now. I mean, it's a beautiful spot in the town of Milford. Hopefully, the town park's going to be the same way. And, we had people that were in favor of it, not in favor of it, but once something, the project comes to fruition, and it's nice to see.
And I would imagine the feedback element for your position can probably be a good thing and also a challenging thing at times. What's the balance there for a parks commissioner to listen to feedback from the community, to be able to know what residents want and try to balance that with making the best decisions for the town overall?
I think in any elected position, it's sometimes you think you know the answer, right? And you just want to do the project. But to sit and listen to the feedback from the people of the town is important, because, you're only one set of eyes. There are many set of eyes on it, and you may pick up, someone may have an idea that you didn't see. So you can incorporate that into the project. People do have their opinions, and you listen to them, but you have to tell them no. That's hard. But hopefully they understand. And again, when the project is complete, everybody's happy.
Well, final question for you, Joe. What would be sort of your words of advice or inspiration for people out there in the community? I know, as we've talked to the Citizens for Milford, one of the real hopeful outcomes of this series of interviews is getting people more involved in the local political process here in Milford, whether that's potentially getting involved in running for one of these positions themselves, or certainly getting more active in voting in local elections as well. What can you tell people at home about the importance of being involved in local government here in Milford?
To me, I think local government is, in my opinion, more important than national government, because you'll see the outcome more at home, and to get involved. If you have an opinion or an idea, I mean, this is your community, right? That this is your town. Get involved, and listen, right? But make the best decision for the town, not personal agenda, I guess.
Today we're so happy to be joined by Rudy Leosh. He's part of the sewer commissioners here in Milford. Rudy, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me, Tim. Appreciate it.
So, we're looking to learn a little bit more about each of these individual roles here in the town. And so I'd love for you to tell us a little bit in your own words, sort of the basic role of a sewer commissioner here in the town.
Yeah, sure. So sewer commissioner role, we basically are, I'll say, an executive administrative board, oversees many things that happens down the board, down the department. We handle budgets, licensing and permits. We work closely with other boards in town, in departments such as zoning, planning, and building department when projects are going on. We will take care of maintaining, obviously, the system, capacity issues, drain layer license if we have new drain layers in town, or renewing applications every year, connection permits. We deal with fees, budgets, sometimes union contracts for our employees. So there's many things that we'll handle down there, as well as making sure that the director of operations has what he needs for the daily operations down there.
Great. And in terms of the commitment, Rudy, for a sewer commissioner, can you kind of walk us through maybe like week to week, month to month, what that time commitment is?
Yep. It really depends on what's going on in town. When things are flowing, so to speak, and quiet, we will generally meet once a month, sometimes every 3-4 weeks, and handle the monthly, again, licensing and fees. We approve our minutes from each meeting. Once a week, we have to sign bills and payroll, so we will either go down the facility or they'll be delivered to us so we can review them and sign them. So that's basically the commitment. When there's a lot more going on, such as when we were dealing with the casino or a 40B or some large projects in town infrastructure-wise, we may have to meet more often and frequently. Just really depends on what our load is. We've done some big capital projects, so we met a little bit more. We're in the process right now of doing a big project down in the Field Pond Road area, which includes piping and infrastructure and upgrading our pump station. Quite a big project. So once that got off the ground, most of that is handled by the Director of Operations for the day-to-day.
What attracted you to first run for this position?
So long story short, when I purchased my home back in 2002, we had some sewer issues and dealt with that for a couple years. And at the time, I felt that the current board wasn't as friendly and as transparent to deal with. So I said to myself, once my issues were rectified, it was a board that I had showed some interest in after learning quite a bit about the sewer department, that I wanted to get involved with and help customers and residents moving forward.
That's a great story to share with the community. I feel that sometimes to get involved in the town, sometimes it takes that personal tie where you have something that happens in your own life that really gives you that motivation to get involved in local politics in some way. And so, that's a great inspiration to folks out there who maybe have an interest in town or something that's caused you to maybe attend some meetings. And, before you know it, you could start to serve in that capacity yourself. So that's a great story to keep in mind. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the big challenges that you faced on the sewer commission?
Not a ton. It's not an overly challenging board. I mean, the biggest thing is when I first got on the board, we were having a lot of issues with what they call I&I, inflow and infiltration. We were going through a period of time with weather where we were having continuing rain, so we were getting a lot of overflows. We were having backups. So dealing with the town residents with their problems was probably the biggest issue, because I had worked through my own and I wanted to help everybody as much as I can. Some were better than others, some as out of your control, just like any other thing. But that was probably my biggest challenge when I got on there. I've been in this town all our life. Family's a 100-year generation. I wasn't a super political guy. I was a town meeting member, but now that I'm in my 6th term, that was probably the biggest challenge, was just trying to make sure I could help everybody the way that I felt that it needed to be helped.
It seems like there can be some detailed projects that the sewer commission deals with. Is there a certain background that is helpful for someone if they are interested perhaps in running for the sewer commission?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody that's been in a construction world, plumbing world, I'll say municipal wastewater world, that is probably going to be a big key to having the knowledge. The current board right now, our chairman has been on the board for years and years. He's a mason. Myself, I'm an automotive technician and a business owner. So again, at the time, I wasn't interested, but I learned quite a bit. And then our other board member worked for the town for years and years in the school. And it's just being able to thought process, budget, learning what you can deal with, trying to get that brainstorming to work towards a goal, work towards a solution for people that are having a problem. So again, anybody that has some type of mechanical ability, knowledge of mechanical systems, you can pick it up and learn.
That's so helpful to hear, Rudy. So as we wrap things up here today, why do you feel it's important for people to get involved in whatever capacity in the local political process here in Milford?
Yeah, so again, I mean, everybody has their own want and need. You have the people with the school committee for the children. Myself, again, it was an issue that I was having. I know we were having infrastructure issues. I wanted to work with making improvements, knowing it wasn't going to happen overnight, and it's still not going to happen overnight. I mean, a lot of these systems are still 100 years old. So we've worked together collaboratively with other departments to just make headway. I think it's really important to keep the town updated and maintained as much as possible. It just keeps everybody happy. It keeps homeowners happy, residents happy. Dealing with the rates, keeping those as low as possible. is really the biggest thing.
We're happy to delve into the role of housing authority here in Milford as we continue to get residents educated on all of the positions that are voted on typically in our local election. And we're so pleased to be joined by a member of the housing authority, Patrick Holland. Patrick, thank you so much for taking the time. Welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me here.
So I'd love to open it up, Patrick, with just sort of a broad question, just in your own words. Can you describe the basic roles and responsibilities for the housing authority here in Milford?
Sure. So I'm an elected housing commissioner. And so it's our responsibility to manage the housing complexes that we have in the town of Milford that are funded from two different sources. They're funded from this federal funding, so we have federal units, and there's state-funded units. And those are housing units that for people who are in need, seniors first among a lot of the groups that we try and assist with housing. And we make sure that they have safe places to live at an affordable rent, so people can remain in our community and be safe and be warm and be happy.
For you personally, what made you interested in serving in this role in the town?
So I've held a number of roles, both elected and appointed in Milford. I think public service is a very important thing. I think taking care of people who need assistance, who need help, is a very important thing. And people need to sort of volunteer to do these things. And I think it's important. I've served in the school committee. I've worked for the town in several capacities. And I just thought that this was a pretty good position to move into. I actually I took office after Sam Bonasaro, who was a longtime housing authority member. He had passed away, and there was an appointment. I was initially appointed, and then I had to run for re-election thereafter. So I've been on, I believe, since 2017, and it's been a great experience.
What's the typical weekly or monthly commitments involved with being part of the housing authority?
I think it depends what's happening. So we have a monthly meeting, and most of what we're responsible for is making sure that the budget is spent properly and that we're improving the buildings in such a way that provides value to all of the people that live in our community and live in our buildings, live in their buildings. I mean, I don't want to say they're our buildings; they're their buildings. And so that's a weekly meeting. It's a lot of review of reports, and it's looking at budgets, and it's approving warrants. We also do quarterly reviews of the finances. We have a special accounting company that we use that is specific to housing authorities to help us understand how we allocate some of our resources. It's not always easy to use the federal and the state funds in the right way, and so sort of very, very specific stuff. So that's a monthly commitment. There's some back and forth with the executive director every once in a while, some questions about some policies and things that have to change. Occasionally, there are concerns from our residents, and they have chiefly among them parking. Parking always seems to be at a premium, especially when it snows. And so, those people will reach out personally, and we encourage people to reach out personally. I obviously live in the community, and I maintain a home phone number so people can call me if they need to. And I like to think that I'm responsive when they do. And so if there is some sort of a controversy, there's going to be a little bit more time, but I think that's time that we're all happy to spend.
I would imagine that this might be a position that for folks from the outside looking to get involved may say, I don't know if I'm qualified to serve on the housing authority. What sort of experience is really helpful for someone to have if they're interested in potentially becoming part of the housing authority?
I think like most public offices, it's really based upon your desire. There's a lot to learn with any elected or appointed position, and there are going to be things that you don't know. And you need to have just a willingness to speak with people and engage in the process and educate yourself. So I would say anyone who is a concerned citizen, anyone who has the time to spend and is willing to put the time into the job can learn how to do it. Now, that being said, sure, does some financial competence help? Yes, of course it does. But I think anyone who's willing to engage in the process can absolutely be a successful housing commissioner.
What are some of the more challenging aspects of being part of the housing authority?
So probably the most challenging aspect that we have right now is the way the state wants us to allocate our placements, the residents that we house. And so there are a number of complicating factors. There are different priorities. There are families that are in emergency situations. There are veterans who have priority in housing. And so the state maintains a giant database of all of the people who could potentially be interested in housing with the Milford Housing Authority. And so when there is a vacancy and when we do have units that we have to fill with a resident, we have to go through the state's process to make sure all of the people who have priority for that housing get contacted first. And so we need to reach out to great numbers of people when we pull down these lists, and we have to spend a lot of time making contact to find out if they want to come and stay in one of the units in Milford, because many people are on many, many lists. It's not as if a person comes and they apply to one housing authority. They apply to many housing authorities. And so being able to manage that process to make sure that we get the unit filled as quickly as we possibly can, because we don't want excess capacity, and make sure that we give the people who have priority and have rights to those units, they get noticed in a timely manner. That's probably the most difficult thing to manage for us. And I think if you were to speak to any housing commissioner in any housing authority across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, they would each say to you that the process is complex and it needs improvement, and it is probably the hardest part of what we do.
In terms of the positives, what are some aspects that you find particularly rewarding about serving in this position?
You know, what's great, honestly, and this is going to sound silly, but seeing the capital improvements to the buildings. You know, we make sure that we just put in new windows for our residents. We put new roofs on a number of our buildings. We repave the parking lot, and all of this stuff. It helps with access for our residents. It makes it easier for them to use our property. It improves their experience living in the Milford Housing Authority. You know, I mean, and these are our friends and our relatives and our family. We want to make sure that these people are safe. And so when you see the capital improvements and you get positive feedback, when you remodel a laundry room and everyone tells you how much better it was in the old laundry room, I mean, those are things that are, I mean, it's the human aspect. When you have an opportunity to sort of touch people and to impact them in a positive way, that's what is the most rewarding part to me. And so I think a lot of that does tie back to the capital improvements that we can do.
Oh, that's outstanding. Well, I would imagine this last question ties in directly to that, but just looking at the big picture as we close out the interview here, Patrick, just looking at the importance of being involved in local government, and whether that's someone out there watching these interviews that may be inspired to serve in one of these roles, or throw their hat in the ring to get elected to one of these positions, or just to get more involved in the voting process or the town meeting process. What can you kind of tell us in your own words the importance of being involved just in general in local government?
The town doesn't run unless the people who live in the town are willing to serve. And all of the positive improvements that we make is because a person decided that they were willing to commit their time to do something to make their community better. And, you know, each of us contribute in our own way to try and do something positive. That's why when you asked me earlier, you know, what are the prerequisites, what are the requirements? You know, the requirements are you have to care about this community and you have to be willing to put some time in to make a positive change. And if you have those two things, if you possess those two things, you can absolutely have an impact on any board, in any elected office in this town. And if you're willing to put the time in, you can absolutely make a difference. And I would encourage everyone, if they have the capacity to do so, to put that time in.
Today we're so happy to be joined by Mark Calzoleo. He is one of the constables here in Milford. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
No problem. Thank you.
So, Mark, I feel like constable is one of those positions that we try to get into it in our coverage during the local election season. It's one that I feel like folks have a tough time getting a grasp on the duties and responsibilities there. So I'd love for you to just kind of paint us a big picture of what the basic roles of a constable are here in Milford.
Well, in years past, a constable had a much more authority similar to a police officer many, many years ago. And obviously that is diminished over time. And now a constable basically handles most of the civil services, such as, what do you want to call them? Divorce papers, obviously. Then you've got evictions. You've got serving of the summary process prior to evictions. A lot of custody battles. A lot of papers for custody battles. Subpoenas. And basically pretty much it. I mean, there's a lot of paperwork involved, and just an eviction process alone is at least 3 to 4 times we have to go serve the papers because of the process involved. Divorces, they can get messy. And mostly the custody battles are probably the messiest because they're a very emotional process.
Sure. Now, most of the elected positions in Milford are boards and committees that will meet on a regular basis. I know constable is sort of a unique situation. How would you kind of describe the week-to-week, month-to-month schedule involved in being a constable?
Well, there's no real schedule. You get a call either from the court or generally from attorneys that are representing somebody for whatever it may be. They can fluctuate between 0 calls for a month to 25 calls in a month. You just never know what it's going to be. They seem to come in runs, though. I don't know why, but they do seem to come in runs. And there's a lot of evictions take place similar at the same time. When I say eviction, not the actual eviction itself, it generally doesn't get that far. It's usually fixed somewhere along the line between the landlord and the tenant, or the court and the tenant. So we don't actually have to go in and do the actual removal, because when we do, it's a process, and it's not a pretty situation when that does happen. But like I said, those are few and far between locally anyway. The city, obviously, to be a lot more of that. But pretty much that's about all we do. I mean, we handle quite a few things. And you've got to keep a cool head, and you've got to try to keep the emotion part out of it. And sometimes you get more bees with honey.
For you personally, what made you interested in a position like this?
I'm really not sure. I mean, I'm really not. It became available, and somebody contacted me and says, "You want to become a constable?" And I says, "Well, my dad was a constable for like 25, 30 years." And I says, "Yeah, why not?" And just did. Put my name on the ballot, got elected, and been doing it now, 13, 14 years.
What do you feel is the type of experience that might come in handy for someone out there who, may be interested in a position like this? What sort of experience, qualifications do you think make for a good constable?
People skills. First and foremost, people skills. Non-aggressive behavior. Definitely not guns to the wall type attitude. And it's try to be pleasant. Every situation's separate and different. Some are more aggressive, and you've got to take a firm stand verbally. I've never had to get physically with anybody except one situation once, but it was close, but it didn't get that far. The ones that are most emotional, I would say, is the no trespass orders. And we get those from the town from time to time to serve a no trespass order. And generally, if it's a town-issued trespass order, we'll normally go with a police officer to keep things in check, because those are the ones where people get very upset. Why you serving me this? And it's for a reason. I mean, that's just the way it is. And again, you just try to be nice and pleasant, and you try to keep control of the situation, like any police officer is trained to do the same. I'm absolutely sure. But we just try to be pleasant and say, listen, I'm just a messenger here, guy. And if it gets more aggressive, and it can, I've had people take the thing and throw it on the ground and step all over it. Just look at them and say, you touched it, you served. And there's a lot of guardianship too. Guardianship, they're generally okay, but some of them are kind of sad. So.
How do you describe the command structure within the constable? Is there someone that you regularly report to? Is it more of an on-call situation? How would you sort of describe?
It's an on-call situation. Okay. The longer you're here, obviously, the more relationships you get with attorneys. And besides Ray Pagucci, I'm the second longest one here. And there's a lot of calls that some of the constables don't want to take. And like I said, I've got the experience, so I've been doing it for quite a while, and I know how to handle most of them. I know the legal background. I have legal background from 30-plus years ago when I worked for the state. And so I'm familiar with the verbiage, so to speak. But there's nobody we report to. The only one we report to is if I have questions, I'll either call Brian Murray or Jerry Moody and ask them, what's our authority here or what's not our authority here. And they handle it and keep them active sometimes.
In terms of jurisdiction, is it just within the Milford community itself?
Not really. Generally, we try to stay right in Milford. We have authority. Some court office orders come through that'll say any constable in the state of Massachusetts, so you can serve anywhere you want. Generally, there's a lot of towns that don't have constables, and the police don't handle a civil process. So we handle it. So we'll go to these different towns. I try to stay within the Worcester County, but there are times we have to leave the county. But there is some place you can contact online saying I have to go to this, this county. Do I have the authority? They send you a thing. Yes, you have the authority to go. But it's not often. Usually if there's some place like, say, in Norfolk County or Middlesex, I'll call a constable out there and have them handle it. This keeps things better. But there's a lot of paperwork. In fact, I served one yesterday outside the area, but it's called a non-interested party service. And they'll use us, even though they don't need a constable or a deputy sheriff, they'll use us to go and serve it because it's more of a professional service, meaning you serve them, a constable served them. What you do is you serve it, but it's more of the people that you serve take it a little more serious because it was served by a constable rather than just, John Smith coming off the street or in the mail. Because, be honest with you, certified mail doesn't work so well. It really doesn't. People just don't pick it up.
In terms of compensation, is there compensation involved with this position?
There's two types of compensation. Generally, the attorney will pay you for your service, and they'll charge their client, etc. Or there's another one, the state, it's called, the state pays it for people that are indigent, that can't afford to have this type of service. And that generally applies to a guardian's case, a guardian's or a custody battle. Additionally, a divorce papers where out of Worcester Court, they'll determine the people are indigent and can't afford an attorney or a constable, and then you bill the state. And that's a whole process in itself. That's a lengthy process in itself. But that's the way you get compensated. And sometimes you don't charge, depending on the situation. I've had cases where I've just felt really bad for the individual who wants to have it served, and I just don't charge it. They just feel bad. There's a lot of sad cases out there, and a lot of cases where the people you're serving for are at fault, and sometimes I deny it. I call somebody else.
We're so pleased to be joined by Ed Bertarelli, who's been a member of the Board of Library Trustees. Ed, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, of course. Thank you. And thanks for this project for educating people in the, the different offices. People sometimes, especially if they're new, if they're regular voters, I think they grasp some of it. But if they're new, they go, well, what is a library trustee? What is a trustee? What does even a trustee mean for any of these particular things? So.
And I think, Ed, that's a really perfect place for us to start. So you obviously have a lot of experience as a library trustee.
Yeah.
Kind of go through maybe some of that language. What is a trustee, and what are sort of what's a snapshot of what the Board of Library Trustees does?
Well, basically a trustee is, in a way, that's exactly what it is. It's a position of trust. That one of your roles is to basically hire a director, and then she or he would run the day-to-day activity of the library. Trustees are very important in enacting policies, in representing the library, particularly in Milford, before the Finance Committee, to advocate for our library budget. Obviously, employees are, in a sense, prohibited from doing that, but trustees are in a unique position. So they can go in and advocate for the library, make the points, and craft the budget as it is needed to be altered over time. So I've been doing this almost 40 years. At the local level, the first 7 years I was on the Milford Board, and then Governor Weld appointed me to the State Board of Library Commissioners, and I served there for 13, but that meant that I had to give up the Milford Board because basically the State Board managed a lot of the funding that the Milford Library got.
When you look at, in terms of the Milford Board of Library Trustees in particular, kind of walk us through maybe the typical meeting schedule for the Board of Library Trustees. What are those sort of core responsibilities that the Milford Board takes care of?
It doesn't require a great deal of work, but it does require that you study some issues in depth. We meet monthly at the library, and we have a chairman, a vice chairman, a secretary, and then the rest of the board. So there's 6 members, which is interesting. The state law it's in multiples of 3. So that's how we're governed. Some are 9, some are bigger. In a municipality like Milford, with our system of government, we're elected. Some towns with a town manager type system, the town manager might appoint people. And in a city, the mayor would appoint the trustees. And then they would serve and they would appoint the library director. So here, basically, each monthly meeting, we'd go through the budget, how expenditures are looking, are there any areas of concern where, say, overages, say it's a cold winter or electric is higher or whatever. We carefully follow that. And then we basically go through the daily business, the reports of the different staff members. So there'll be for example, there's the young adult librarian who handles the children's room and the young adult room, the reference desk, which is obviously, literally what it is, and the circulation desk. Then we have something you don't see very much because it's downstairs. The units would be the technical services part.
So again, Ed, in terms of the library trustees, are there any commitments or are there any qualifications for the trustees that may be unexpected for someone running for that position for the first time?
No, I wouldn't think so. But it's probably a responsibility to sort of see what the textbook definitions of what trustees should do, and things to avoid. For example, the trustees don't run the library; the library director does. When trustees get into that personnel, and that's a slippery slope, because if there are concerns that relate to the director, if there are problems in staffing or whatever, it's the director's responsibility to come forward and mention them. But that also indicates that, say, the chairman and the vice chairman of the board would be like the contact people between the library director and whatever, because being the chairman is a different, greater time commitment, because different facts come up, and the director and the chairman would converse about different, if there are problems or good things or bad things or whatever.
What would you say is the most rewarding aspect to be part of the library trustees?
Oh, well, I think as I just said, some of the programs that we're interviewing, I mean, we're all in Milford, no matter how long our people were here, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of immigrants. And so it's our challenge, I think, to adapt to each wave as people come in, and also provide, for that group, but also provide great services for senior citizens who are heavy users of the library. Part of it is to keep up with the technology, because as late as 1995, that's when we still had the card catalog. And that's really not that long ago in a sense, 20 years. But look at how revolutionary things have changed. I mean, it's amazing to think. Yep.
It really is.
Yep.
Well, Ed, I appreciate you taking the time to join us. I would say my final big picture question for you, as we look at the broader scope of the local election season, in your own words, why do you feel it's important for folks to step forward and be part of local government here in Milford?
Oh, well, that's a challenging one, because I think we found not only in Milford, but in towns all over the state, the amount of participation is lower and lower. I serve on several boards, the Housing Authority and the Geriatric Authority, and as a 70-plus-year-old person, you'd really want younger people to come forward as well with a different perspective. You try and have your own perspective and open to things, but again, it's good to have the challenge, but we're finding more and more that people don't want to be involved in things, whether it's the political climate or the fact that there's time constraints with family, or, I mean, I've tried to recruit certain people to run for trustee, and say if they're a school teacher or involved in a thing that people are worried about after-hours commitment. It was encouraging to see so many young people at the town meeting last night who are learning the ropes. And it can be rough if you're going in. I mean, I first got elected in 1988, and, you come in and you watch, and, so it's as you saw last night with some of the memorials they gave to a lot of people. Some people have been 40 and 50-year town meeting members. And that's the sort of the bedrock of the Milford volunteerist thing, which is any town needs that. And without that, you become, a suburban, what do you call it, bedroom suburb where people work and leave, come back, not involved in the community. And that isn't helpful, especially with the challenges we're facing. You challenge it by, I think, being active. And part of that is, I think, having a good library, having a good school system, all the support groups. And, for example, the senior center, So they all play a role, I think, in mesh as well. And so I think as trustees, we can be proud of the library. We've maintained it, I think, in a pristine way. I've haunted the trustees for years. We've got to do our list. We have original things here from when the library was built in the 80s. We've got to do our checklist to see if there's things we need to replace now, because we know in the future with the new high school coming online, funds may be tighter than they were now. My goal and my message to people is to get involved, try and allocate some time to do something. And the library board is a perfect board to do that because its commitment is balanced. It isn't an excessive commitment. It's not a minimal commitment. But I think it's a very rewarding commitment because you can see in a building of that size the effect of the things you do.
Today, we're so happy to be joined by an individual who has served in multiple capacities here in local government here in Milford. But today, to talk a little bit about the trustees of Vernon Grove Cemetery, we have Scott Crisafulli with us. Scott, welcome into the show. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Again, Scott, we've had this opportunity to partner with Citizens for Milford to talk with a lot of folks who hold positions here locally in Milford, and we could probably talk about a lot of different positions that you hold here in town. But today I want to put the focus on the trustees of Vernon Grove Cemetery. So if you could kind of, in your own words, go through the basic roles and responsibilities involved in being a trustee for Vernon Grove.
Okay. So I've been a trustee for, I'm on my I'm on my 5th year. So started out a little different than it is today. Back then we were overseeing every operation in the cemetery, whether it was employees, the job they do day to day, the funding, the spending, the bills, the payroll, all that stuff. So since I got on there, we have now had the opportunity to add a new position, which is a cemetery, Vernon Grove Cemetery advisor, or I forget the exact name, sorry. But that position is part-time, and they basically oversee the day-to-day operations as far as, the payroll, to the bills, to the burials and the sales of the plots, and so they've taken that kind of out of our hands. It was tough for us to do on a monthly basis, and we only meet once a month. So, but our role is to oversee that position more than anything. Any questions with payroll, any question with budgeting, writing the budget now, which is something that the trustees do, which we never really did that in the past. We've got more into that end of it rather than the day-to-day operations.
So with that shift, how do you describe sort of the weekly or month-to-month time commitment involved in being part of the trustees?
So right now I'm the chair. So my time is probably about an hour a week, and then we have a meeting once a month, and that's usually a couple hours.
What was it that made you decide to first get involved with the trustees over at Vernon Grove?
Knowledge, I guess. I wanted to know how the cemetery ran. Have no idea how a cemetery ran when I got into it, and how I could help make that cemetery better, or improve what they're doing, or just to learn what they do. Anybody that's wants to get into a position like that, that's a good stepping stone to your first elected position. It's very basic.
That probably takes us into a good kind of broad conversation as we're giving information to the viewers about getting involved in local government here in Milford. There's obviously a lot of different positions in town with a range of responsibilities. So for someone who has held multiple positions around town, what is your advice for if someone has an interest in getting involved in local government, where to start?
That's a great starting point right there. It is so basic, but yet to get there is the same. You know what I mean? So you have to get elected. You have to get your signatures. You have to get on the ballot. You have to do all that. You have to, maybe not so much for that position because it's usually not a tough race, but, you got to advertise. You got to do interviews. You got to put signs out. It's a good startup to understand how it works without spending tons of money and being really buried in it. So absolutely a good stepping stone for your first elected position.
For you personally, what has been your motivation to get as involved as you've become in government here in Milford?
Well, I am a lifelong citizen of Milford, born, raised, schooled, and work here. So, with my other position as highway surveyor and also parks commissioner, this is all the same kind of things I do as the highway surveyor as far as budgeting, and the work itself is pretty similar, and the employees, overseeing employees, and all these things are the same. And I know over the years how I've been able, from that position, to help other departments, such as parks and cemetery and, even school department. But not knowing a lot about it from the inside. I didn't know how it ran, but I offered to help and we did what we could do. But to be in there and see how it runs and see the needs and be able to help each other, each department, it's been great. And we've got a lot more done. We've saved a lot of money. We've been able to combine stuff and kind of, make everything easier and better, pretty much.
I would imagine that for people out there who have an interest in getting involved, there's maybe things that hold them back, worrying that they don't have enough of a knowledge to be able to bring to the table, or they may not have the time available in their schedule to commit. But it seems as though, from what you're saying, that as long as you have an interest in making the town better, you have a perspective, you have an experience that you can bring to the table, and the rest will sort of work itself out as you gain that experience on whatever board or committee you may be running for.
Exactly. You need no experience for the positions. Obviously, it's elected. You don't need the experience. And you will gain the experience. You'll start to understand town government, where we just don't go out. We can't just go out and buy something. Everything has to be procured and out to bid, and the whole bidding processes and the way town government works as opposed to the private side. It's much different. So in the small department like the cemetery, it's very minor and minimal. So you wouldn't get overwhelmed. You can learn slowly and start to understand how it works. And I always find that, I take it for granted because I've been doing it for so long, but I find that new people come in, don't understand town government and town processes and how things are different from the private world. So if you sit back and listen at meetings, you'll understand and you'll start to learn. And, it's pretty wild watching people actually understand when they say, oh, I didn't understand that you can't go buy something for over $10,000 without getting quotes. Or, you get all these holidays off and they're all paid in unions, and we deal with unions there now also. So you learn a lot, and it's not overwhelming. So that's why it's a good stepping stone.
Yeah, that's a great perspective to have. I guess maybe along those same lines, Scott, as we wrap things up, what would be your overall advice for people, whether they're interested in potentially running for an office here in Milford, or just to encourage people to get more active in the voting process or attending town meeting? What would your overall advice be for people in terms of getting more involved with their local government?
I would say if you do want to learn, because it is learning. If anything, you're going to learn. If you do want to learn, then absolutely try it. In positions like the cemetery, are usually not, usually once you're in, and, it is very rare somebody runs against somebody. I don't know why, always should happen. If you have something to offer or something you want to change, then you should do it. But just a learning experience. Government's government. Whether you are, the governor of the state or you are the trustee at Vernon Grove Cemetery, it's pretty similar. Everything's pretty similar. It just scale is different. So if you have any interest at all, absolutely give it a shot.
Hello, I'm Jerry Eddins, chairperson of Citizens for Milford. With me is fellow member of Citizens for Milford, Jose Costa, and also a member of the Board of Assessors, Stephen Borges. In this segment of our pre-election information series, we'll be talking with Stephen about the role and responsibilities, what's involved in serving on the Board of Assessors. So, Stephen, could you please start off by giving us an overview of what the primary responsibilities are in serving on this board?
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, I guess, the most important thing as on the Board of Assessors would be really, I guess, to put it simply, is to make sure that our tax bills go out in a timely manner, both real and personal property. And so, our job is basically, we're entrusted to Make sure that there's fair and equitable property taxation on all of our property here in town. And, that's really regulated by the DOR, Department of Revenue, and the Mass General laws. So we're just really implementing that. So, yeah, that's pretty important considering that's where our town really raises most of our money for our budget, to be able to fund our schools, highway department, all that sort of thing. So, so generally, yeah, that's what we're doing is kind of basically just implementing those laws and guidelines.
Good. Thank you, Stephen, for that. How often does the Board of Assessors meet?
So yeah, I remember, so really, I guess it's seasonal, so it can vary. We try, yeah, I would say, I guess once a month or more, depending on the year. Like right now, we're in a reevaluation year, which we do every 5 years. It's the first time I've gone through it, and you meet a little bit more often, and towards the end of the year, you meet a little bit more often. So minimally once a month, usually, or more.
Okay.
Mhm.
So in addition to those meetings, what is, like the average weekly time commitment? Are you doing other assessments outside of the board meetings, for example?
We are, yeah. So the meetings themselves can also vary depending on what the meeting is about. 1, 2 hours or so. But yeah, there's ongoing professional development, continuing education that we do. Even at the beginning, we're certified. Once you're become a member, you have a period of time to complete a course provided by the DOR, and that's 12, 15-hour course. But outside of that, I mean, even today, I just got an email from the Department of Local Services. It's part of the Department of Revenue, with updated, it's like a newsletter that we read. And so there's that. There's, the continuing education and then the meetings. So it can vary. But yeah, with this one, there's a steep learning curve at the beginning. There's a lot to learn. So at the beginning, I certainly spent a lot more time trying to just understand and learn everything.
Right.
Good, thank you.
Mhm.
How long is the term of a Board of Assessors member?
3 years.
Okay. And Stephen, have you found serving on the Board of Assessors to be a rewarding experience?
I have. Yeah. I mean, outside of being, a town meeting member, this is really the first time I've done anything, volunteering my time within the town. So, I always tell my kids whenever you can volunteer your time and, give back in any way, to do so. And I was able to have the ability to do this. And yeah, it's definitely rewarding. Being involved in, I enjoy learning new things, and I've certainly learned a lot. So that's been rewarding. But even, when fellow members of the community come in for, especially like a tax abatements, or wherever we're helping, whether it's veterans or just people with disabilities, they come in and they can have a little bit of relief. We get to sign off on that because, they meet all the requirements. That part's really, rewarding for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's a really good message. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for taking the time to share this information with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to help.
As we wrap things up here tonight on this extended edition of the Milford Informer, if you missed any of the information we relayed to you this evening, you can catch this full edition of the Milford Informer anytime over on our YouTube channel. We'll also make sure to air all of these interviews individually throughout our programming schedule on our public and high definition channels, so you can catch these multiple air times over on those two platforms. And of course, we'll also have each individual interview in its own special local election playlist over on our YouTube channel as well. So check in with our YouTube channel for this and so much more of our Milford TV produced content. But that's going to do it here for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend, and we'll be back soon with another all-new edition of The Informer. Until then, from all of us here at Milford TV, this is Tim Coet saying have a great week. So long, everybody.